Wyoming Territory, 1883. The train hissed as it slowed into the dusty station of Casper, and the woman in the last passenger car gripped the edge of her seat like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. She did not know her name. She had woken 3 days ago in a cramped sleeping car, her dress torn, a bruise blooming behind her left ear, and a yellowed envelope clutched in her hand. It was addressed to a Mr. Yates Grant, Box 4, Casper, Wyoming. Inside, a letter in her own handwriting. I am coming. I will be your bride. Please wait for me, E. That was all. No past, no memory, no reason why she could not remember her own face in the mirror. Only the name E and the ache of fear in her chest. When the train finally stopped, she stepped down into the high sun and dry air. Her gloved fingers trembled as she folded the letter again and looked around. And then she saw him. He stood near the edge of the platform, tall, lean but strong. Rough brown hair curled under his hat, his jaw dusted with stubble. His eyes scanned the arrivals until they landed on her, and something tightened in his expression, recognition or confusion, she could not tell. Miss, he asked, stepping closer. His voice was low, steady. Are you Eleanor? I do not know, she whispered. His brows drew together. You sent me a letter, said you were coming to marry me. She opened the envelope again, held it out to him. His large hand brushed hers as he took it. I woke up on that train. I do not know who I am. Yates read the letter again, jaw tightening. You said your name started with E. And you signed this E, that is something. I do not remember writing it, she said, but it is in my hand. He looked at her, his voice gentler now. You are shaking. I have been shaking for 3 days. He hesitated, then took off his hat. My name is Yates Grant. I live over near Sweetwater Creek, about a half-day's ride west. I do not know what happened to you, Eleanor, but I will help you remember. She blinked. Why? Because you came here alone. And because if you were brave enough to send this letter, then I reckon I can be brave enough to help you find your way back. The wind kicked up dust along the tracks. She squinted at him. What if I am not who you think I am? I am not worried about who you were, he said. I care about who you are now. Something in her chest shifted like the first crack of thawed ice. He nodded toward his wagon. You hungry? Yes, she said. He helped her up into the seat, careful, respectful. She watched him as he climbed in beside her, taking the reins. You can call me Eleanor, I suppose, she said quietly. All right, he said, glancing at her. Eleanor it is. They rode in silence for a while, the miles of open land stretching wide, golden grass swaying along the ridges. He pointed out the mountains in the distance, the edge of the Wind River Range, and the way the sun caught the top of the peaks. She listened, grateful for the sound of his voice. When they reached his homestead, it was late afternoon. A modest cabin, sturdy fence, and a red barn stood against the horizon. 2 horses in the paddock lifted their heads. He helped her down, and she steadied herself on the ground. I did not expect you to arrive this way, he said, opening the door for her. I did not expect anything, she murmured, because I remember nothing. Inside, the house was clean and simple. A small kitchen, a table with 2 chairs, a settee near the hearth, and books along the shelf. He showed her the room he had prepared, a guest room with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a small window. I will stay in the barn tonight, he said. You do not have to. I do, he said. You need time, you need space. I will not rush you. Something in his voice made her trust him. She nodded. He turned to leave, then paused. If you wake in the night afraid, the lamp's on the shelf. Strike it easy, and if you call, I will come. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She did not know who she had been or why she had come. But the sound of the wind outside and the soft creak of the house felt less frightening than before. Yates was outside in the barn, a man she had never met, and yet he had looked at her like she mattered. She whispered the name to herself. Yates. The next morning she found him with his sleeves rolled up, splitting firewood behind the barn. She stood there a moment, watching the way he worked, the calm strength in him. You are up early, he said when he saw her. I could not sleep much. He set the axe aside. I made coffee. She followed him back to the house. They drank in silence, and then she asked, What did I say in the letter? He looked at her carefully. You said you were ready to start again, that you wanted a place to belong. She swallowed. That sounds like something I would say. "It does," he said. Later that day, she found a trunk near the guest bed. Inside were dresses carefully folded and a small mirror. She stared into it, trying to see someone familiar. Nothing came. But when she turned and saw Yates standing in the doorway, something inside her eased. "I think I want to remember," she said. "I will help you," he said simply. That evening they sat by the fire. Eleanor told him of the few things she had felt: flashes of fear, a train whistle, a name she thought might have been hers once. He listened, he never pressed. When she grew quiet, he said, "I lost someone once." She looked at him. "My brother," he said, "during the war. After that, I stopped letting people close, but when your letter came, something in it felt honest. I thought maybe it was time to try again." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "Maybe you were right." He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. And for the first time in days, she felt steady. She may not have remembered who she was, but sitting beside him, holding his hand, Eleanor felt like she was someone worth finding. The wind came in colder the next morning, and Yates hitched the mule and cart without saying much. Eleanor watched from the porch, arms wrapped around herself as the gray sky pressed low. "I need to ride into town," he said, adjusting the bridle. "Supples are low. You can come if you feel up to it." She stepped down onto the hard, packed earth, her boots sinking slightly into the frost-softened ground. "I think I need to see more than these hills." He handed her a shawl from the back of the cart. "It'll be colder on the road. Wrap this tight." They traveled the dirt track eastward, the wagon creaking in rhythm with the mule's steps. The land opened wide ahead of them, plains scattered with scrub and sage, distant fences marking properties Eleanor couldn't name. She stayed quiet most of the way, her thoughts a tangle of empty spaces. "You were a schoolteacher once." She turned to him. "Why do you say that? You hold things like one. Your hands when you pick up a book, the way you read aloud last night carefully, like you were used to little ears listening." She looked down at her lap. "That makes sense." "Could be wrong," he added. "But I don't think I am." In town, she followed him through the mercantile, the scent of kerosene and flour thick in the air. He greeted the shopkeeper, a woman with white hair piled high under a lace doily hat. "You're Mr. Grant's girl?" the woman asked. Eleanor hesitated. "Not quite. She's a guest," Yates said, stacking tins into a crate. "Visiting for a time." The woman gave a slow nod. "Well, if you need anything stitched or mended, I keep a basket in back." Eleanor thanked her, then wandered toward the shelf of ribbons and notions. A spool of pale blue thread caught her eye, something about it stirring a feeling she couldn't name. "Take it," Yates said behind her. "Whatever you're drawn to." She turned. "I don't want to take what isn't mine." "Well," he said, "maybe it is." They rode back with the cart heavier, the mule slower. Eleanor glanced at the horizon where a line of gray cloud touched the hills. "Do you always come to town alone?" "Mostly." "I used to go with my brother." He didn't glance at her as he said it. "Now I go quiet, get what I need, and leave." She watched his profile, the way his eyes followed the road but stayed distant. "What about the letter I wrote?" "Did I say anything about myself?" "You said you'd been hurt once, but you were ready now. You wanted to build something steady." Her throat tightened. "Did I say how?" "No." She folded the thread between her fingers. "I think someone took something from me." "Something that mattered?" He didn't answer. Just let the reins slacken slightly as the mule crested a small rise. The cabin came into view, the barn behind it, smoke curling faint from the chimney. They unloaded in silence. Eleanor carried a sack of oats inside, setting it near the hearth. As Yates lit the fire, she sat at the table and unwound the thread, running it between her fingers. "I remember a man's voice," she said softly. "Not yours, someone else." He straightened, dusting his hands on his trousers. "What kind of voice?" "Too close, too loud." He didn't ask more. "Just came to sit across from her, waiting." "I think he was angry," she said, "but I can't see his face." Yates nodded once. "You don't have to force it. Memories come when they're ready." "I'd like them to hurry." He gave her a warm slice of cornbread from a tin he'd brought back. "Eat. Then we'll walk down to the creek, water's running high from the snowmelt." She took the bread, the warmth of it grounding her hands. They walked later in the afternoon, boots crunching over dry leaves. The creek moved quick along its banks, clear and cold. She bent to touch it, let the chill sting her palm. "You built the cabin yourself?" she asked. "Me and my brother, he laid the first beam." Her eyes met his. "You talk about him like he's still clothes." "He is." They sat on a log above the water, their shoulders not quite touching. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. "I keep thinking I should feel afraid," she said. "I'm alone with a stranger in a place I don't know." "You're not alone," she glanced at him. "No, I'm not." He didn't reach for her hand, just sat still, his presence solid beside her. As the wind picked up, she pulled the shawl tighter. "When I remember who I was," she said, "what if I don't like her? Then we'll build someone new." That night, she found a small journal in the dresser drawer. The pages were blank. She dipped the pen in ink and began to write. Not the past, but the present. The color of the creek, the sound of Yates' voice when he said her name. She closed the book and placed it under her pillow before easing into bed. Outside, the wind shifted again, bringing the scent of pine and melting snow. Inside, Eleanor slept with her hand curled around the thread of something she hadn't yet named, but trusted enough to hold. The snow came before dawn, thin flakes brushing against the windows like ash. When Eleanor stepped onto the porch, the ground was dusted in white, and the trees stood still, limbs bare and dark against the sky. Yates was already outside, leading the mule toward the barn. He caught her eye but didn't call out, just lifted a hand in quiet greeting. She walked down the steps and joined him, pulling her shawl tighter against the cold. "I didn't expect snow this early," she said. "Neither did I," he replied, latching the barn door behind him, "but the mountains have their own mind." She looked toward the ridge where clouds pressed low. "I was thinking I could help with something today." He studied her face. "You ever mend a fence line? I don't know," she said, "but I can try." They walked the pasture edge, boots crunching over frost-bitten grass. The west fence had sagged in two places where the posts leaned into the wind. Yates handed her a coil of wire and showed her how to brace it against the post. "Hold it steady," he said. "Use your weight, not your arms." "I don't have much weight," she said, gritting her teeth as she leaned in. He chuckled under his breath. "Then use stubbornness," she glanced at him. "I have more of that than I thought." The task was slow, hands chilled and stiff, but the rhythm settled something in her. When they paused to drink from the canteen, she leaned against the fence and looked out across the open land. "Have you ever been married?" she asked quietly. "No, why not?" He capped the canteen and passed it back. "Didn't trust myself to get it right." "I don't think so," she said, "but I might have loved someone once. I feel it sometimes, like a bruise that's faded but still sore." Yates didn't respond at first. Then he said, "You carry yourself like someone who's had to be brave in quiet ways." She turned toward him. "You keep saying things like you know me, but you don't." "I don't," he said, "but I watch and I listen." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then what else do you see?" He looked at her a long moment. "You don't flinch when things get hard, you don't ask for less than honesty, and when you laugh," he stopped, then added, "you laugh like you forgot it was safe to." She exhaled through her nose. "That's more than anyone's said to me in weeks." They finished the repair just as the snow picked up again, soft and steady. He helped her over the fence rail, his hand warm through his glove. She didn't let go right away. Back at the cabin, she peeled off her wet boots and stood barefoot on the rug by the hearth. Yates knelt near the stove, feeding and kindling. "I want to try something," she said. He looked up. "What's that?" "I want to cook tonight." He blinked, surprised. "You remember how?" "No," she said, "but I want to see what my hands remember that my mind doesn't." He nodded and stepped back. "The kitchen's yours." She moved carefully through the pantry, reading labels, opening jars, smelling dried herbs until something stirred behind her ribs. She soaked beans, chopped onion, and stirred without a recipe, letting instinct lead. When the scent filled the room earthy, warm, with a bite of spice, Yates leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I'd bet on you," he said. She looked up from the pot. "That's a dangerous thing to say," he shrugged. "Some things are worth the risk." They ate at the table, steam rising from their bowls. Eleanor tasted the stew and paused. "I know this flavor," she whispered. "Cumin, my mother used it." Yates set his spoon down. "You remember her?" Not her face, just the way she said the word. "Cumin," like it was a secret. He didn't speak, just reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. She turned her hand over, letting their palms press together. "I want to know everything I've forgotten," she said. "We'll take it one piece at a time." Afterward, she stood at the window while he read by the fire. Snow fell heavier now, cloaking the pasture, softening the world. "You don't talk much about what you want," she said without turning. He folded the book closed. "You first," she hesitated. "I want to stop being afraid of what I don't remember. And I want to learn who I am in this place, not just who I was before." He stood and crossed the room, stopping beside her. "Then I'll keep showing you." She looked up at him. "And what do you want, Yates?" He didn't answer right away. Then, voice low, "I want to wake up one morning and find you still here." She studied his face. "I'm not leaving." "I know," he said, "but you might remember something that changes your mind." She stepped closer. "Or I might remember something that makes me stay." Their breath mingled in the cold air near the glass. Outside, the snow kept falling, steady and sure. She reached for his hand again. This time, he didn't let go. By late November, the snow had thickened into a slow, steady rhythm, blanketing the hills in a hush that made every sound feel sharper. Eleanor had begun rising before dawn, her hands steady now as she ground coffee and lit the fire. She didn't ask permission to do these small chores anymore, she simply did them, as though the rhythm had always belonged to her. That morning, Yates stepped in from the barn with his coat dusted white and a small splinter in the side of his thumb. She saw it before he said anything and reached for his hand without a word. He stood still as she pulled him to the table and fetched a sewing needle from the drawer. "You've done this before," he said, voice low. "I must have," she replied, teasing the splinter free. "My fingers remembered before I did." He didn't flinch as she worked. "I'm going up the North Ridge today." One of the ewes wandered off. "Tracks lead toward the aspen grove." She looked up. "You'll take the rifle." "I will." There was a pause before she asked, "Can I come?" He studied her face. "It's a hard climb, ground's soft under the snow. I'm not afraid of falling. You might be afraid of what we find." She didn't look away. "Then I want to see it." They packed bread, a tin of salt pork, and a wool blanket just in case. She rode behind him on the bay mare, arms around his waist, her cheek pressed against the back of his coat. The trail narrowed as they climbed, snow clinging to low branches, the air sharp with pine and something older earth, perhaps, or memory. Halfway up the slope, they dismounted and tied the horses beneath a rocky outcrop. Yates led ahead, boots breaking through the crust of snow with sure steps. Eleanor followed, heart thudding harder from exertion than fear. Near the crest, he stopped and pointed toward a tangle of brush. A ewe lay there, alive but motionless, her leg caught in a snarl of wire someone had left behind long ago. Without speaking, he knelt and worked the wire loose. Eleanor knelt beside him, pressing her hands against the ewe's flank to calm her. "She's breathing steady," she said. "She'll stand soon if we give her time." They waited, kneeling in the snow, the silence between them full of breath and purpose. After several minutes, the ewe heaved herself upright, trembling, then limped forward, back toward the trail. Eleanor stood slowly, brushing snow from her skirt. "She didn't cry out," she said. "Animals don't always. They bear pain quiet." She watched the ewe move off, head low. "I think I was like that once." Yates turned toward her. "You're not anymore, I'm not sure. But I don't feel hollow the way I did when I stepped off that train." He didn't speak, just watched her, his breath rising in the cold. They made their way down slower, the light fading into the blue of evening. Eleanor's hands stayed warm in her gloves, but her thoughts had grown cold with the sudden edge of memory. "I saw something up on the ridge," she said once they reached the horses. "Just for a moment." "What did you see?" "A red kerchief, in my mind, around someone's neck, I don't know who. But it made me feel cornered." Yates didn't ask more. He helped her into the saddle and mounted behind her again, his arms steady around her waist. Back at the cabin, Eleanor laid the blanket across the hearth to dry and poured water for tea. Yates set the rifle back on its hooks and leaned against the doorframe. "You're remembering in pieces," he said. "That's how the mind works sometimes. I don't want to remember only the worst things." "You won't," he said, "but they might come first." She turned from the stove. "Did you ever feel like something you lost was never really yours to begin with?" He nodded slowly. After the war, I thought about that a lot. Whether the life I wanted was ever mine to claim. And now I think maybe it waits for us, even when we forget to reach for it. She crossed the room and stood in front of him. I don't know who I was before, but I know I want to stay here. He didn't touch her, just let his eyes search hers. Because it's safe, because it feels like I belong, not just to the land, to you. He shook his head once, not in refusal, but as if trying to hold back something strong inside him. You don't have to say anything, she said. I just needed you to know. He reached then, slow and sure, his hand brushing her cheek. She leaned into it, eyes closing. They stood that way until the kettle began to hiss. Eleanor stepped back, not with hesitation, but with the quiet grace of someone who had made a decision. That night, she wrote again in the small book she kept beside her bed. The ink smudged slightly where her hand brushed the edge of the page, but she didn't mind. She was writing not to remember, but to hold on to what was finally becoming hers. The first green shoots came in mid-April, pushing through the thawed ground near the creek bed like timid promises. Eleanor saw them as she walked the ridge path alone. A basket looped over her arm, half full with early herbs and smooth stones she'd found catching the sun just right. She paused near the water's edge, kneeling to trace her fingers over a cluster of wild onions growing in the shadow of a boulder. The air carried the scent of wet bark and a hint of sweetness from somewhere upriver. She closed her eyes and listened to how the land breathed, how it seemed to know her now. Behind her, footsteps crunched lightly through old leaves. You missed breakfast, Yates said. She looked over her shoulder. I woke early, couldn't sit still. He crouched beside her, his coat hem damp from the brush. I figured I'd find you here. I used to walk into the woods when I was a girl, she said. It felt safer than inside. He didn't interrupt. I remembered something yesterday, she continued. A woman's voice, older, sharp-edged. She told me I was too much trouble to keep around. Yates shifted beside her but kept quiet. I think she was kin, Eleanor said. Or maybe someone who should have been. He reached into the basket and turned a stone over in his hand. You believed her. For a long time I think I did. But not now. No, she said. Not anymore. They sat a while longer, wind stirring the reeds behind them. Then Yates stood and offered his hand. Come on, I've something to show you. She followed him south, past the edge of his pasture and through a narrow trail she hadn't yet walked. The trees thinned into open ground, and there, tucked into the rise of a hill, stood a small frame half-built, timbers cut and set into the earth. She stared at it. You're building something, I started last week. Figured I'd wait to show you until it looked like something. What is it? A house for two, he paused. If you want it, her throat tightened. You don't even know if I'm staying. I don't need to know everything to start building, he said. I just needed to know what I wanted. She stepped onto the foundation, wood creaking beneath her boots. It's quiet here. I thought you'd like that. She looked at him, then out to where the land dropped into the valley below. I want to stay. Yates didn't speak, but his shoulders eased and something in him settled visibly. That night they sat on the porch, lantern light flickering against the dark. Eleanor leaned into his side, her head against his shoulder. I keep thinking about the woman I used to be, she said. But I think I finally stopped waiting for her to return. She doesn't need to, he said. No, she doesn't. A soft breeze stirred the trees. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, then fell silent again. Yates took her hand, slow and sure. I've been waiting to ask you something, he said. She looked over. What's that? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver locket, oval and plain. I found it in town at the jeweler's. Thought it was simple and strong, like you. She opened it. Inside was a pressed violet, dried and delicate. He cleared his throat. I want to marry you, Eleanor. No clock ticking behind it, no fixing anything, just a life we make together. Her fingers tightened around the locket. Yes, she said, voice steady. I want that. The wedding came in May, under the wide sky with sun warming the field. The minister from Casper rode in with his wife and brought a bundle of wildflower tea and a hymn book. Yates wore his best shirt, sleeves rolled, collar brushed clean. Eleanor stood barefoot in a calico dress she'd sewn herself, hair braided with meadow grass. There were no guests beyond a neighbor couple and a curious boy who brought a carved whistle as a gift. No music but the wind. No vows but what they'd already spoken with their hands and days. When it was done, Yates kissed her with both hands at her waist, and Eleanor felt the last of the old weight slip from her shoulders like a coat she no longer needed to carry. They moved into the new house in midsummer, once the roof was sealed and the walls whitewashed with lime and ash. Eleanor painted the door blue, claiming the color made the place feel like it belonged to her too. Yates built her a writing desk by the east window where morning light spilled over the fields. There she kept her journal, its pages now full not with history but with the life she had claimed, line by line. She planted herbs near the steps. Thyme, chamomile, and a creeping mint that wound over the stones without asking permission. In the evenings, she read aloud beside the stove, her voice still quiet but no longer uncertain. Yates listened with his hands folded behind his head, eyes half closed, as if her words were the only thing he needed to hear. One night, as Autumn leaned in again, she touched his arm and said, "I don't wonder anymore." He opened his eyes. "About what? About who I was before." He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "You're who you chose to be, that's all that matters," and it was. They lived with the land, not in spite of it. Slow mornings, long rides, the occasional storm that rattled the windows but never shook the walls. They did not chase joy, but built it meal by meal, kiss by kiss, each small act layered into something whole years past. The scars beneath Eleanor's memory softened into seams she no longer felt. She taught letters to the neighbors' children in the winter and learned to stitch without looking in spring light. Yates planted apples behind the barn and split wood with a rhythm she came to know better than any clock. They did not speak of the past much. It had done its part. Now it stayed behind them, quiet, like the first snow disappearing into thawed earth. When Eleanor looked at him across the field or across the room or across the years, she did not wonder anymore what she had lost. She knew only what she had found: a home built steady, a hand that never wavered, and a love rooted deep enough to hold through anything that might come. And that was enough.